Well, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world today. This is Riz, speaking to you live from Orlando, Florida. Joining us today is Randy Williams and Maarten Eekels. And today we'll be chatting through lessons learned from Ignite. For those of you who are not able to join us in Chicago at the beginning of May, unfortunately you missed a fantastic conference, packed with knowledge and information, and certainly it was an excellent show. And today we're gathered online to chat through some of the lessons learned from the conference and to talk through really a go-forward action plan for you to not only talk about the conference and the information that was communicated during the conference, but this conversation today was put together to really summarize that for you. And there's a lot of information that will be coming at you today, so make sure you've got some notes and a pen handy to write down all the content and all the information. As you can see there on your screen, you see the familiar faces of Maarten and Randy who joined me this morning. Gentlemen, would you like to say hello?
Good morning, Maarten speaking. And welcome everybody.
And welcome everyone as well. So this is Randy Williams. I'm with I help run our AvePoint Client Services team based in San Diego. So I'm actually calling to you very early in the morning, but hopefully I sound chipper and ready to go. We've got lots of fun things to talk about. Maarten, anything else you want to say? Just you want to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Yeah, my name is Maarten Eekels. I'm calling from the Netherlands, where it's already halfway past the afternoon. So a good afternoon from here as well.
Okay, excellent. All right, so again, welcome everyone. So we're going to go ahead and kick things off, and if there was any one message that we heard loud and clear and over again, it was this slide you see here. It's this concept of mobile first, cloud first. And this was, in fact, mentioned not just in the keynotes, but really as a theme across each of the sessions. And I'm guessing that we're getting that message repeated again over at a partner conference. So I assume, Eric, that's why you are in Orlando. So I'm sure you may share with us a tidbit of information or so that's coming out of that event. But in any case, just to cover some of the key points with this is when we talk about mobile first, what we're really talking about is ensuring that the best mobile experience remains possible regardless of the device that you're working on. So it's really that mobility of the user experience that matters most when we talk about the solution. And when we talk about mobile, of course, we're not talking about anything that's Microsoft-centric. And this is really one of the things that Satya has really brought to the culture in Microsoft. It's really quite different. Those of you might remember, in the not too distant past, where it was really considered blasphemy to carry around an iPhone or an iPad or any really non-Windows device. That culture in Microsoft has really changed. In fact, there's quite a few people on campus that you'll see nowadays carrying those other devices, and it's really an embracement of just the de facto use that the industry has, and I think really Microsoft is a healthier company acknowledging where they sit in that marketplace. Still fully intend to compete in the mobile world, but acknowledge that solutions need to run on whatever device people choose to use. And I'm certainly excited to hear that. No doubt you guys have heard the news about Office and other types of editions of their platforms coming out on iPad and Google Play and other kinds of platforms as well. And it's not just about mobile. In fact, the cloud is what powers that. So when we talk about the cloud first, it's recognizing that it's a diversity of clouds that's going to be providing the solution that ultimately drives the innovation that you're bringing to your organization. And it's not Microsoft's cloud. It really could be partner clouds. It could be private cloud. It could be public cloud. So it's recognizing that there are a multitude of clouds, and it's really our responsibility looking forward to be able to stitch those together in a way that provides again, a fantastic user experience. The user doesn't have to really think about where's my information stored, how do I manage it, whether it's on premises or in the cloud or in this kind of unknown hybrid world. So it's recognizing for that to happen, we do have to have a cloud-first mentality. So moving on to the next slide. it's recognizing that the personal computing that has really taken off over the last few years, and I think probably the best way to demonstrate this is the now ubiquity of app stores. And again, this is present across all the different mobile platforms that we know that are out there, and certainly a very big part of Windows 8 and very soon to come out Windows 10. So it's really kind of, to me, the idea is it's taking that app-like vision where you're really empowering the users and really driving more control and capability from their side. It's leveraging that concept as you're thinking about the business context. So it's how business applications can also be delivered in the same model, giving the users the freedom and the capability to be able to pick the apps that make most sense to them. But then also make sure, and I don't going to be getting too much into this, but Eric's got some thoughts towards the end of this deck, where we'll talk about some of the governance issues and really trying to find the right balance of security versus availability of your content. We touched a little bit on the cloud, and I'll bring a few more points to this in another part of our presentation later today. And that's also, rethinking our productivity and business process. There's a lot of different ways that you can interpret this. The one that I think resonates most with me, and this is certainly true for anyone that's been in the SharePoint space for the past few years, it's to recognize it's not really about SharePoint, right? It's not really about technology. It's not about what's cool. It's about what makes a difference in the lives of every information worker we touch. So it's really a business-first strategy, as I sometimes like to say. And when you think about that in either an Office 365 or a collaboration-like solution with an on-premises SharePoint, it's recognizing that you need to think about the business first. You need to think about how productivity and processes are handled. There's a change management aspect that you want to make sure of. So ultimately, you're really thinking about how is this going to change the user experience, allow them to get out of the office by 6 o'clock faster, and ultimately be able to make faster and smarter decisions. So hopefully those key themes come out to you. Those were the takeaways that I had on that. And do want to point out that there's an opportunity for all of you to ask questions in this event, so feel free to join in that space as we continue through our talk here. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Eric. He's going to spend a little bit of time talking about Delve and the Office Graph. Eric, what can you share with us?
Thanks, Randy. A couple things I wanted to just point out here before we jump into the Delve and Office Graph slides is, yes, absolutely, I'm speaking to you this morning from very sunny and warm, extremely warm, Orlando, Florida. I'm actually from Toronto originally, where I'm flying back up to today, and I'm actually in the airport right now in a very empty terminal, thinking through some of the information that I've heard of over the past few days, having been here in Orlando for Microsoft's Worldwide Partner Conference. So for those unfamiliar with the Partner Conference, the Worldwide Partner Conference is usually about 15 or so thousand people. That's what we have here this week. 15,000 people who are very much in the business decision maker space, the executive space, talking through Microsoft ecosystem, partner-to-partner connections. And it's a very, if you've never been to it, it's a very interesting conference to attend from that perspective because of the level of conversation that's happening. And therefore, when you have keynotes like Satya Nadella's on Monday here at the Convention Center, Satya's speaking all about the enhancements and the future about Microsoft and where he's carrying the organization. And as Randy talked about off the top, we're living in this very much cloud-first, mobile-first world. And if you could actually see my setup right now as I'm huddled in the corner of an airline terminal, you can imagine that without the availability of very small compact devices and the internet, I wouldn't be able to speak to you this morning. So it's ironic that I'm giving this type of talk from this type of environment. But Satya's message was very much focused on the next generation, and he made some announcements around the Office 365 world, the development world, some exciting conversations to push the credibility and to push the true collaboration conversation forward. And it's been a really exciting week here, and a lot of the conversations, partner to partner, are about the collaboration and how we can use Office 365 more, how we can use SharePoint more. Julia White was on stage on Monday and talking all about SharePoint. There's a great quote from her online if you are able to find her right now, where she's talking about SharePoint, and it's here to stay. So it is a super exciting time right now And those side notes, if you will, go very well into this conversation as we start talking through Delve and the Office Graph. So as I jump to the next slide, you'll see the Office Graph slide, which really talks about the situation that we're currently in. So Office Graph, if you're not familiar with it, is really an underlying service that runs atop Office 365. It's specifically designed to capture the interactions between individuals and organizations as they go through their day. So for example, if I had a document open, that specific interaction gets stored by the Office Graph, making that information available to other applications such as Delve. Here you can see how that conversation works through actors and the objects. So as you go through the action of viewing or modifying information, the actor, the individual, touches the object, and the Office Graph, which as I said runs in the background, will go through and start to create those interactions. So who is the individual who is using that particular piece, that particular document, that particular component of information, who works with who, what's trending around, and what have they viewed as they go through their particular interaction with the system. So as we jump to the next slide, you can see that the system is very powerful around the interactions from individual to individual as they go through their specific day, their specific interaction with SharePoint, with Office, with O365, with their digital experience. So there's a lot of further information that can be found up at Channel 9. You can see the link to Channel 9 there. The way that Delve actually works is actually quite straightforward. It's a very simple concept. So each view is actually a search query against the Office Graph search index, and it actually uses the same managed properties as a regular search does. So as we jump to the next slide, you'll see that interaction in a little more detail and how they all work together. There we go. So here you can see, for example, that we have some pre-created boards on the left side. You can see that the information and the content that's up there is very much focused on the interactions as people have gone to use them. So they go from pre-created boards to almost a collection card of boards, and all this information is being surfaced by the most relevant content. So whatever it is that you've clicked most recently, whatever you've used most recently, whatever documents or functions you've used recently, allow you to see that information through this interface. And that provides you with, obviously looking at a speedy interface, you want to be shown all of your work. You want all of your work to surface up to you as quickly and as relevant as possible. So this gives you quick access to that work. It provides access to people within the organization, and it's a new way to organize and curate that content in order to see what's happening within the organization. So the takeaways from the conference were really the following. Obviously, it's a very exciting time, and it's a very exciting space right now with Office Graph, and the takeaways that Delve and the O365 experience is giving you. And it's truly new and exciting technology. It's something that Microsoft has been working on for a very long time. And again, as I said, it's about building the collaborative discussion in order to get more work into the hands of the people that need to use it as quickly as possible. So if you aren't using O365, it's certainly a conversation you want to have within your organizations to see if that usage can be in place, or you can use it in future, because the Office and Office Graph and Delve components are atop O365. So if you're on-prem, you may not be able to use them as effectively as you would like to. With the 90-day rollouts and the updates that the O365 team is deploying, any changes that are coming out into the environment are happening rapidly. So that's another exciting development where previously we're used to seeing much longer releases of content and information. The O365 experience, Delve and Office Graph, is being updated quite rapidly and quickly. So we want to make sure that people are maximizing those efficiencies and integrating them into their organizations as quickly and as best as possible. There's obviously opportunities to customize and be creative with the information that we're we're using. So be sure to recognize the new functionality when it does come out. And with that, I will throw it over to Maarten to discuss Office 365 groups.
All right. So first, let's talk about the next-gen portals. And like Andy already mentioned, the mobile first and the cloud first strategy, that the key themes that Microsoft is focusing on. Well, I can tell you right here in the Netherlands, it's cloud first as well. It's quite cloudy weather, unfortunately. Hearing all these sunny weather reports from Eric and Randy. But never mind. We'll move on to the next gen portals. And if we start with the next gen portal overview, what Microsoft is aiming for with the next gen portals, they've been really been doing quite some sessions on Ignite around the next gen portals, because what they've been noticing and what we have all been noticing is that when you're running SharePoint, there's still quite a lot of customizations going on. So SharePoint out of the box, it provides a lot of basic capabilities, and the capabilities you can already see in the bottom bar here. So Office 365 and SharePoint, they provide social capabilities, content management capabilities, chat capabilities, email, the Office graph that Eric just spoke about. But in the end, if you want to combine all of these features and if you want to build something, you still need to customize your portal. You still have to do a lot of customization to create these rich portals that you can really use within your organization. And now with these next-gen portals, Microsoft is trying to deliver us the building blocks or even the ready-to-go portals that already combine a lot of these building blocks and try to create a portal for you that is intelligent, social, mobile, and ready to go. And with intelligent, we mean that, for example, that personalization is important, and that, like we can see in Delve, that the stuff that shows up, that pops up for you in Delve, is stuff that really relates to you. And social is we want to interact with each other. We want to find each other's knowledge. We want to find each other's experience. But it has to be mobile as well. We want to have these as an app on our mobile device, or at least the pages, the portal itself needs to be responsive so that we can watch it on a mobile device. So Microsoft has been creating a couple of portals, and Eric has already told you about Delve, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Office 365 Video and the new so-called Infopedia. But what they're going to show you is what they're going to give you as well is building blocks to create your own custom ready-to-go portals. Now, when we have a look at Office 365 Video, that was basically the first next-gen portal that Microsoft released for us, and it's part of the Office 365 family. So it doesn't run on premises, but what it does, it really leverages the building blocks that I just told you about. So it uses SharePoint content management, because when you upload a video, the video is stored inside a SharePoint document library. But then that same video is being put to Azure to be transcoded into different bit rates and to different resolutions, so that it doesn't matter if you are on a large bandwidth place, maybe, or somewhere where you have smaller bandwidth, or maybe you're watching the video from a smaller device screen, or maybe from a big laptop screen. So we can always provide you with the best content, with the best video quality available, that's being transcoded for you in the backend in Azure. And everything is secure. So all the transportation between the videos, it's all over secure channels. You can still set up permissions. You can create channels in your Office 365 video portal. And what they already announced at Ignite, and which has been released a couple of weeks ago, is the possibility to embed videos in other SharePoint sites as well. So before, when Ignite was when we were at the Ignite conference, it was only possible to view videos inside your Office 365 video portal. But right now, when you go to a video, you can create some embed code, and there's a very simple button for that. You click and you get the embed code, and with that embed code, you can embed a video on other SharePoint sites if you would like to do that. Also, in the first version of Office 365 Video, Microsoft still used Flash as a player to play all those videos. And right now, in the second version, which was, like I said, released a couple of weeks ago, it's all HTML now. It's HTML player. It's very responsive. So the screen, the player, and the videos, they adapt to the screen size that you're visiting the video portal on. Now, if we move on to the next slide, we're going to show you a screenshot of the code name Infopedia. And Infopedia, Microsoft said itself that it is still a code name, so it's not something that has been released yet. It's they're aiming for release somewhere later on this year. And Infopedia is the code name. And what they want to do with Infopedia is they create this next-gen portal to work with knowledge management, to capture knowledge. So this is a sample home screen that they showed on Ignite, and you can see Delph-like boards here, and these boards are actually microsites. So behind this homepage, there are small microsites where you can create articles in a very rich and intuitive way. So it's very easy to author these article pages, add pictures, etc. And when you create the articles and when you create those microsites, navigation is automatically created for you, and based on personal settings and maybe some personal interactions with all the articles, you can see the Delph-like boards and being presented to you in that way. And the nice thing is, I'm not sure who of you already seen Sway. Sway is a new part of the Office family, and the authoring canvas that is being used in Sway, Microsoft is aiming to bring that same authoring canvas into Office 365 as well. So if you're going to create a blog article or an article for a microsite, you will have that same very intuitive Sway-like authoring canvas to create your articles. And of course, everything is responsive. So again, if you visit this portal on a smaller screen size, it will still look very great. And if you watch it on a larger screen size, it will look like this. Now, if we move on to the Office 365 groups, Microsoft has not really released this as part of the next-gen portals, but I kind of consider it as a next-gen portal as well, because it also leverages different building blocks, as I will show you later on. But the reason that Microsoft came with Office 365 groups is because what they call the rise of dynamic teams. So it's not really something that Microsoft has invented, but this is the phrase that has been popping up around. And what it says is that if you want to do modern collaboration, it shouldn't matter where you are located or in which team you are located, if you are part of the organization or not. You just want the best people to work with you. So you bring in the best people from around maybe your organization, maybe your company, or maybe even from outside of your organization to deliver something, to deliver a project or deliver a product, or to create something. And whenever the team is finished, whenever you have delivered that stuff, the team just dissolves and you go back to maybe join another project. But these are what we call dynamic teams. And the Office 365 groups is really a way to facilitate those dynamic teams. Now, if you move to the next slide, you will see those building blocks that I was just talking about. Office 365 already has Outlook, and when you are working in a team, you are probably going to share emails, send emails to each other. But maybe you want to share some files as well. So you could use OneDrive for that. And maybe you want to take notes. So you have joint meetings, and in these meetings you're going to take notes, and you want to store those notes somewhere, take actions. So you're going to share a OneNote file, maybe share a calendar. Now, we all know the calendar sharing functionality in SharePoint was quite horrible, actually. But there's still a need for teams to share a calendar and maybe bring that calendar into their own calendar without a lot of hassle. And you want to start chatting with the people in that dynamic team. So there's Skype involved, and maybe you want to have some social interaction as well, and you will start asking questions to each other. Well, all these building blocks, they're already there, but if you want to use them for a particular group, you have to do something. You have to create a site somewhere and join these building blocks and do a lot of stuff to make this work for that particular group of people, for that dynamic team. And with Office 365 groups, it's already there. Just one click of the button and you create a group for your team, and all these building blocks are being put together and are being facilitated and provisioned for your specific group. So what happens is that when you create an Office 365 group, actually it's kind of a distribution list that's being created in Outlook for you, with a document library in the backend that we call OneDrive, where we can store files, and we can share. We create a OneNote meeting as well, a meeting file, OneNote file, and integrate Skype. Everything is already in there. So all the stuff that you need to facilitate that group is in there. And if we move to the next slide. Yes.
So Maarten, let me just interject with a quick question here. So we see on this slide here, Skype, we see OneDrive. I talked earlier about the consumerization of IT and trying to bring that kind of commercial-like experience to the enterprise. Could you talk for a moment, how is OneDrive and Skype different than the commercial offering? So OneDrive for Business and Skype for Business.
Okay, you mean like the personal OneDrive and the regular Skype?
Yeah, exactly. So what is Skype for Business, and how is it different from Lync, or how is it the same? Maybe there's some confusion around that.
Okay. All right. So what we mean here is actually in this screen is OneDrive for Business and Skype for Business. So and we also have the personal OneDrive and the personal Skype. So there could be a little confusion about that. Skype for Business is actually the successor of Lync, which is the successor of Office Communicator. So Microsoft has had a couple of names for basically the same product, and of course it evolved the product. But Skype for Business is a way to, within your business, facilitate chatting, calling, phone calling, and you can even screen sharing. And you can even nowadays, with the new Skype for Business, you can use it to connect to maybe your old telephone system as well. So you can call outside your organization as well, and use it for broadcasts as well. So it's more, but it can in fact interact with the personal Skype as well. So when you have people who have a personal Skype, you can call. Those people can call each other over Skype. Skype for Business and the personal Skype. And regarding the OneDrive. The OneDrive for Business is what used to be the My Site in the old SharePoint, and now OneDrive for Business is part of SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016, what we're going to talk about later on, and Office 365, where you can share your personal files, store your personal files, and share them with the people you would like to share them with.
Okay, that's very helpful, Maarten. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Continue on.
Yes. So the next slide. Office 365 experience available. Here you can see that there's different angles that you can access your information within an Office 365 group. So whether you go to your email client, and that can be Outlook Web Access, or that can be Outlook 2016, or when you go directly to the group, or when you go to the OneNote, it's all tied together. So from your Outlook experience, you can click on a Office 365 group, and there you see all the conversations going on inside that group, and you can access your files that are actually stored in the document library directly from the interface of the Office 365 group. And you can also see a screenshot here of your calendar, where you see your own calendar and the Office 365 group calendar in the same view. So all these different angles that you can use to access information, and that you can use to collaborate within that Office 365 group. All right, I can see a question from the audience here as well. Let me answer that right away. And the question is when to create an Office 365 group and when to create a Yammer group. Yeah, that's a very good question. And my answer would be that an Office 365 group is for teams that want to share files and share a calendar, etc. as well. Back in the days when we had a shared calendar in Yammer as well, that doesn't exist anymore. And Microsoft is trying to make sure that we store files where they belong according to Microsoft, and that's in SharePoint. So you no longer store files in Yammer as well. So the Office 365 group is more for that, and Yammer is more if you want to do a cross-organizational communication. And if that's something that you're looking for, then Yammer would still be the way to go. I'm not sure if Eric or Randy has more to add to that, but that would be my explanation when to choose what.
No, I think that's.
I'm sorry, Randy, you go first.
Thank you, sir. I was going to say that's an excellent question, and I think that's a phenomenal answer to it. So I'm certainly okay with that. I was just going to interject and say that to all those who are attending that we are monitoring the questions and answers. So if you do have a question that pops up, as Maarten has illustrated, feel free to drop it into the dialog box, and we will either answer them on the fly as they come up in conversation today, or we'll be doing a Q&A following the call today.
Yeah. Right. So let's move on to SharePoint 2016 then. There's been a lot of stuff on SharePoint 2016 at the conference as well. And basically, the whole message is SharePoint on-premises lives on. Yes. So all the people who still have SharePoint on-premises scenario or are looking for hybrid scenarios, Microsoft, 3 years ago, their statement was that maybe one more version of SharePoint, but even that was not even sure. And after that, probably no more on-premises versions of SharePoint. And they changed that statement a year and a half ago and into no, we're really going to focus on hybrid and hybrid scenarios. That's what we're aiming for. And now in the last Ignite in May, they really showed us that, hey, we are putting a lot of investment in SharePoint on-premises. 2016 release is coming out, the beta is coming out later this year, and they're aiming for a launch somewhere in the second quarter of 2016. And here on the screen, you can already see a couple of cool features that they have announced at Ignite that I want to talk briefly about, and I have a couple of more slides later on, and some more major features that I think are worth talking about. But these smaller features that we already have, that we're going to have available in SharePoint 2016, let's start, for example, with the SMTP connection encryption. In 2013 and earlier versions of SharePoint, it was not possible to send encrypted emails from SharePoint to your mail server. So whenever an alert or a workflow notification or emails like that are being generated by SharePoint, if these emails were being sent out, those emails would never be encrypted, because you could only use port 25, and an unencrypted email would be sent out to your Exchange server maybe, and then distributed to the people that the email was intended for. And in SharePoint 2016, you can use the start TLS. So it will facilitate TLS encryption, and actually there is no fallback to. So it can only use TLS, and it can only be encrypted. A second cool feature is the fast site creation. We all know that if you provision a new site or a new site collection in SharePoint 2013, it could take a while to create that site collection, because all the artifacts need to be provisioned. And when the site is there, we need all these features to be activated, and that could take up quite a while before that site collection is actually ready for use. And now in SharePoint 2016, they're going to use a copy method in the database to create sites. So what they're doing is not recreate all these artifacts, but they just pick a site template from the database, and well, you could see it as creating an additional row inside the database, and your site is there. And the features don't need to be enabled. They are already enabled because they were enabled and activated in the base template as well. They've put a lot of investment in hybrid deployment automation. So now when you want to create a hybrid 2013 scenario with the 2013 and Office 365, there's a lot of PowerShell stuff that you need to do, and a lot of finger crossing as well that you need to do to make this work. And in 2016, they're going to have wizard-like deployment scenarios where you can choose what workload you would like to have in Office 365 and what workload you would like to remain in your on-premises SharePoint farm. And by selecting the options, the wizard is going to create the configuration for you. Another very cool feature that I like very much is durable links. And what we mean with durable links is that right now, if you have a file stored somewhere in SharePoint 2013 and you change the file name of that file, or you move that file around to maybe another site or site collection, the link to that file doesn't work anymore. And in 2016, they're going to introduce durable links. And with that, you can actually change file names or copy or move that document to another site collection, but the link to the document will still work. So you can send out this one link around and to your people in your organization, and that link will always keep working for that particular document. Now, if we have a look at prerequisites, what do you need from an infrastructure perspective to run SharePoint 2016? You are going to need at least Windows Server 2012 R2 or Windows Server 2016. So it will not work on Windows Server 2012 or Windows Server 2008 R2. And also from a SQL perspective, you are going to need SQL Server 2014 SP1 as a minimum. So it's not going to run on earlier versions of SQL. All the other prerequisites are basically the same. So you need the same, the memory requirements and the CPU requirements and the hard disk free space requirements. They're all still the same for 2016 as they were for 2013. Another new feature, 100,000 site collections per day per content database. That's an improvement of that's a tenfold improvement, because in SharePoint 2013 you could only store up to 10,000 site collections in one database. And now in 2016, you can store 100,000 site collections inside a content database. And that also has to do with the fact that they are going to increase the maximum database size into terabytes. They haven't told us exactly how much the limitation is going to be, but we all know that in 2013 and earlier versions, we had this best practice of do not exceed database size over 200 gigabytes. Well, that best practice, they're going to scale that up into the terabytes. And that makes it possible to store more site collections inside the database as well. And another reason to increase that database file size limitation is because they're going to increase the file size upload limit as well to 10 gigabytes. So right now, a file cannot exceed the size of 2 gigabytes to upload it in your SharePoint environment. Now with SharePoint 2016, you can upload files up to 10 gigabytes. So large video files or maybe large drawing files, etc. You can now upload them. And the last cool feature that I want to discuss on this slide is, of course, the list threshold of 5,000 items that we probably have all encountered somewhere in the past. They are going to scale that list threshold up as well. They haven't announced to what number yet in public, but we do know that it's going to be, well, larger than the 5,000 item limit that we currently have. So that's good news as well. Now, if we move to the next slide, this is a very nice, cool feature that I want to talk to you about, and it's called the min role. And this is basically, this has to do with how you design your farm and what every server in your SharePoint farm is doing for you within that particular farm. Because in SharePoint 2013, we already had this differentiation between web servers and application servers. But basically, you would decide yourself which service application, which SharePoint servers you would run on which server, right? So you could call one server maybe a web server, and you could label another server as an application server, but still you could run, well, services that mainly consist of backend jobs. You could still run those on a web server, and you could still run services that require user interaction on one of the application servers. And now with this min role that they have introduced in SharePoint 2016, that's not really possible anymore. What they have done is that they are going to decide, Microsoft is deciding for you, you choose a role for your server. So you either, when you run the setup of SharePoint, you will get to choose which role this particular server is going to fulfill. And then you choose whether that's going to be a front-end server or an application server, or maybe a specialized load server or a distributed cache server. And based on the role that you choose, the services and service applications that are tied to that role are going to run on that server. So services that require end user requests are going to run on a front-end server. So that way, when a user accesses maybe Excel services or something, or a managed metadata service, they no longer need to traverse to a backend server, to an application server to get that data. So it reduces latency that you maybe have in your 2013 form. I like this very much, this new min role. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is patching. For whomever of the audience who has ever tried to install a cumulative update or service pack for SharePoint 2013, we know that was, well, these file sizes, these packages, they were huge. And they could be larger than the installation files of SharePoint 2013 together, right? So Microsoft has acknowledged that, and they are going to make sure that the patching is going to be, and the cumulative updates are going to have a much smaller footprint. So as you can see in this slide, in 2013, one update package consisted already of 37 base packages. And if you had, and with packages we mean MSIs and MSPs, and for every additional language pack that you had running in your environment, an additional 18 packages, so MSIs or MSPs, were added. So that's going to have, just with one additional language pack, you already had 55 packages that needed to be installed on your server. And in 2016, it's going to be reduced to 2 base packages and 1 additional package per language pack. So the footprint is much smaller. And what they have also announced is that no longer downtime is required when you're going to patch your SharePoint 2016 form. So that's very cool as well. You no longer need any downtime. Now the last thing that I want to talk about is the cloud search service application. I've seen this on Ignite, and I really love this feature as well. So this is a new service application in your SharePoint 2016 on-premises farm, and actually this is coming to SharePoint 2013 as well. So it's going to be baked in SharePoint 2016, but later on this year it's going to be released as an update package for SharePoint 2013 as well. And what it does, it's going to let your on-prem environment do the crawling and the parsing of your content, and then bring that crawled content and these file pieces, these chunks, it's going to bring those to Office 365, and Office 365 is going to do the processing and the indexing of that content. And by doing that, you can leverage search and delve, also delve in Office 365 to use on-prem data, right? So in Delve you now have only documents and Yammer conversations and from Office 365, and it only uses your calendar from your Exchange Online environment. But with this cloud search service application, all the on-premise files are going to be indexed as well. This is very cool. All right, so that's what I had to tell about SharePoint 2016. There's so much more to tell, but there's a lot more great stuff on Ignite as well. So Randy, please go ahead.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Maarten. Good discussion. Looking very exciting about the SharePoint 2016 story, and to amplify what Eric said earlier from Julia's message, SharePoint still lives on, doesn't it? All right, so let's continue the conversation, friends, and I want to spend just the next few minutes or so talking more about the Azure investments that Microsoft has made. I'm sure all of you have heard of the Azure Platform as a Service and Infrastructure as a Service at some point, but I just wanted to share with you a little bit of kind of this inside the numbers, just to give you a sense of the investments that Microsoft is making and the growth that we're starting to see in that space. So on the slide here, you see a number of different figures. So the Azure growth exceeding 10,000 customers per week. And actually, I read the other day that the SQL databases is actually now approaching 1.5 million databases. So that number is already out of date. That's the problem with these slides. They're always changing. The number of individual storage objects in Azure, and there's those of you that are following the Azure capabilities, there's all kinds of different storage types that you have within Azure, whether it's NoSQL table storage or it's an actual blob, either a page or another type of blob that's stored in your backend storage. Lots of flexibility there. A very big part of the Azure integration, this also gets back to Office 365, is leveraging the Azure AD capabilities and kind of connecting that story back through your on-premises environment to either achieve same sign-on or single sign-on capabilities. So we're seeing an incredible growth there in the number of unique Active Directory accounts that are there. And it's not just from the infra and administration side. There's also pretty strong developer story as well, with quite a few users that are registered with Visual Studio Online. That is the web-based IDE that can be used to build and deploy solutions. Of course, the more comfortable and familiar Visual Studio full experience is, of course, fully supported both in on-premises and Azure and Office 365 development. So just a few of the numbers here about Azure. And let's talk then about the footprint of the actual data centers. And Microsoft has been investing heavily in this as well over $1 billion and counting across the various data centers. And here's just a small glimpse in the scatter chart where those are located across the globe. These are not in virtually every continent except Africa, which is to come. I spent some time out in China not too long ago, and there's actually two data centers now in China provided through a partner, one in Shanghai, one in Beijing. New ones coming up within India, so the Asia-Pac region is pretty happy about that. I spent quite a lot of my time in Singapore, and I've actually seen the data center in Singapore. It's incredibly impressive. So 19 different regions actually are open for business now, as we would say, and not quite every service is available in every single region, but that is very, very quickly changing. So most likely by the next time I do this presentation, I don't have to say that line anymore. There should be an effectively even parity of services offered in each and every data center. And if we just look at each and every data center just for a moment, just to give you an idea of the magnitude that we're looking at. So a single data center is about 100 meters across, so it's about the size of the football field. What we here in the States would call soccer. And so the idea, though, is that just this one data center, this particular building here can actually hold 2 jumbo jets. So just to give you a magnitude of the scale within this. And every single region actually has 16 of these. And so every single region has 16 different data centers. In total, that actually equates to over 600,000 servers in each and every Azure region. What I'm really trying to point out is that the ability for Azure to scale to meet any possible use cases is really quite incredible. Back to Singapore for a moment, we've been working with one of our customers out there to build an educational portal that would support the Singapore educational system, upwards of 500,000 students. And there was quite a lot of concern whether or not the Azure cloud would be able to support an unknown workload of up to 500,000 users. And so we talked a lot with Microsoft. We really did some kind of deep architecture. We looked at the data center potential. And as we looked at the compute and we kind of aligned it to what our needs were, it was well above and beyond what we could ever possibly imagine. So when we really get down into the nuts and bolts and whether or not this compute power and storage power is going to meet our business needs, rest assured that capability is there and then some. Whether your demands are large or small, know that you're going to be covered there. And then before I go too much further, I also want to mention that this also isn't just about the cloud. While we do say cloud first, mobile first, there is a very important on-premises and hybrid story. Maarten's already talked about the SharePoint 2016 investments that Microsoft is making. I want to just quickly mention that there's quite a lot of investment that Microsoft is making for the private data centers, the private clouds, as we sometimes say, and that's where I'd like to introduce the Azure Data Stack, just the Azure Stack. So when you think about Azure, there's all this infrastructure that you're aware of, right? You've got the network, you've got the storage, you've got compute, you've got both infrastructure as a service capabilities, which is all your VMs. You've got your platform as a service, which delivers an incredible amount of capability, some of which we've already alluded to, like machine learning, which powers Delve. You've got the Azure Video Services, which powers Office 365 Video. So there's all these different services that we want to deliver. That, of course, has historically been in the Azure Cloud and the Azure Cloud only. Well, the idea with the Azure Stack is really being able to bring that and the applications within your own on-premises data center. So literally your own private cloud within the enclave of your own building, and really be able to get that power, get that potential, not just in scalability with compute and storage, but all of the management that goes along top of that. So the Azure Stack portal, the Azure Resource Manager, all of the administrative tools from PowerShell to the UI, all those capabilities are available. And that doesn't work to just your on-premises or to just the cloud. It's really a unification of those. So this is really, again, with that hybrid story, I think it's very illustrative. So imagine being able to have a scenario where I have an application that I have to deploy. Whether that application gets deployed into your on-premises Azure Stack or the cloud Azure, or in fact either of them or both of them, it's truly a click once like deployment where I can control where exactly that resource and that artifact goes, and there's just really an incredible capability that you're going to be able to get with that. So the on-premises data center is not going away either. It's really about making sure that you can leverage that as long as you need to, and using the same capabilities, APIs, advancement tools that we're used to within the Azure capabilities. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears then for a moment. We've been talking mostly about the sort of IT pro types of things, but there is still a very strong development story. Just for a moment, I'm just going to give you kind of a little bit of a timeline in how development has changed as this next slide unfolds here. And I'm talking mostly in this particular context about Office development. So if there's any developers on our webinar today, and if any of you have developed Office applications, so plugins, whether these are the old style with VBA, or maybe some of the newer ones which are based on VSTO, that's a pretty painful experience, right? I mean, you know, the older ones, VBA, were literally written in Visual Basic. There are all kinds of issues because maybe macros were not going to be enabled. And then you just have weird incompatibilities depending on the version of Office that you would have. So the dev story back in the days was really pretty limited. You know, there was some diceiness whether that would run across each of the different Office applications. When that darn thing crashed, that would actually bring down the application as well. So there were some kind of administrative challenges with that. As we kind of moved past that and got into some of the .NET capabilities that came in with the COM add-ins and the VSTO, Visual Studio Tools for Office, and some of the full trust code that we saw within earlier versions of SharePoint, you know, most notably for Office 2007 and 2010, that story got better. But really, as we look towards today and the future, we realize that it's not just about the Office client that runs on a Windows desktop. It's about all the different Office experiences, right? You heard me at the top of the session really talking about what matters most is the mobility of the user experience across all the devices that someone uses. And so that's not just a commitment that Microsoft is making in the products that they deliver, but it's really a commitment to the APIs and the developer story so that organizations and consultants and other third-party organizations can also build those applications and provide that solid user experience that works across each of those devices as well. For those of you that have not been following it, Microsoft actually does have an Office App Store. There is an actual development model for building Office applications, which are actually surfaced and hosted through your Office application. But unlike the traditional kind of old school model, where it would actually be a Windows dialog, for example, that gets surfaced, the next generation of apps are actually surfaced through HTML. And so they're really more server-hosted applications, whether it's a provided hosted app or some other model, that really allows you to kind of to evolve that application, to change it as you need to, and make sure that right user experience gets delivered. So, for example, if I'm working on my Outlook mobile device, making sure that that interface is responsive, for example, and caters to the form factor of the device I'm using is something that we want to make sure that we do. The last thing that I will mention just very briefly about this particular slide is there's a bit of a unification that we're starting to see across the APIs, and I'm speaking mostly in particular with Office 365. So as some of you probably know, the word and the label SharePoint is harder and harder to see as you work with Office 365 today. Right now we start calling them sites, and we know that sites are still SharePoint, but that label starts to kind of disappear. And another way of emphasizing that is while the SharePoint API is still there, and what we've for many years called the client object model, or sometimes just called CSOM, that is actually still there as well. But what we're starting to see is all the other Office 365 APIs. So think about where Skype for Business, formerly Lync, and Exchange, and some of the other capabilities that are there. The unification of that API, it really means that it's not just a SharePoint-based application anymore. It's really an Office, or more accurately, an Office 365-based solution. So it's recognizing that that API set is going to continue to evolve. There will be a greater consistency across those APIs that you see across the different types of applications that you produce. And it's a little bit too early to say if this will hold true or not, but I think it's very probable to start to see that API even get unified with other types of solutions that Microsoft has. I'm talking about that dynamic CRM and things of that nature. So it's pretty doggone exciting to see how the Office Dev story is continuing to grow. And I'm really excited about this unification and hopefully getting to the point where we truly get to the idea where I can write this application once and really then deploy it on multiple applications and multiple types of user experiences. And for any of you that is following Windows 10, it's ready to come out in less than a couple of weeks now. You'll see a pretty strong story about this universal application concept that will apply to that type of device as well. All right, so with that, I'm just going to give you kind of a little bit of a glimpse what Microsoft provides today for this added roadmap. And I touched on this earlier, where it's not really just about the Windows experience, right? It's about all the devices that people use. So it's the Macs, it's the iDevices, it's Droids, etc. Microsoft doesn't provide a full portfolio across every single application, across every single platform yet today. So just acknowledge that this is part of their current roadmap. These investments are happening actively as we speak. And you can already start to see that some of those investments have already begun with iPad and iPhone. And these will continue to move towards the right as the Macs, the Droids, and even the Universal Windows applications, the UWAs, continue to go. In fact, one thing that I'll point out, which is kind of interesting, so Eric earlier talked about Delve. Microsoft actually does already have a mobile Delve application. Curiously enough, that application is available on iOS, so your iPhones and iPads. It's available on Android, but it's not available for Windows yet. So indeed, the world has changed. Microsoft does recognize the market share that Apple and Android has, and they're making sure that they're catering to that world. So hope that gives you an idea of where we are today and where this is going in the future. All right, so with that, Eric, my friend, I'm going to hand it back off to you. I know you've got a few important kind of business concepts that you want to discuss with aligning business to IT.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Randy. And as always, gentlemen, a great conversation today about Ignite and all the great content that's been up there. So kudos to you both for putting together a great conversation today. I hope you're all enjoying it. And we do see there are a few questions here that we will touch on as soon as I wrap up this section on strategy. So for those of you that have heard me speak before or had the opportunity to read some of my content online, thank you for that. You know that my focus is very much on the strategic side of SharePoint, very much the business side of SharePoint. And one of the conversations that has really been moving forward in boardrooms across North America and around the world in recent months and years has been the strategic conversation. And the strategic conversation as it relates to Microsoft SharePoint really begins with understanding of your business goals and your strategy. So for those of you that are scratching your head right now, trying to figure out what your strategy is, you are not alone. So once Q2 rolls around and SharePoint 2016 comes out, there's going to be 5 versions of SharePoint that are available to the public and in use across organizations worldwide. And 5 versions of everything is an incredible amount. It's a huge number. There's going to be all sorts of orphaned users who are sitting around looking to see where their support is and what types of support they need going forward. And it makes for a very difficult conversation within these organizations as they look to expand their strategies and align their strategies going forward. It's very possible right now that many of the people that are listening to this conversation today have more than one version of SharePoint that's currently in use. And when I speak in front of audiences and I ask for people to put their hands up, I would say about half of the audience, regardless of audience size, half of the audience has more than one SharePoint version currently in use. And certainly that's something that can be a concern depending on how it's managed. So one of the things that I would talk about today, and one of the key messages that we drove home up in Chicago in May for Ignite, was the conversation about focusing on workloads, focusing first on what it is your organization is going to be doing with SharePoint, within SharePoint, for SharePoint, and then going and figuring out which version is best and which one you can leverage best moving forward as an organization. So if you are an organization that is perhaps in the government or banking sections and you have very stringent compliance and policies around the products and software that you use, you may still be on 2007, you may still be on 2010, and that's okay as long as you have the support and the strategy that you need to go forward with that platform. If you are and do consider yourself to be bleeding edge or cutting edge and you are on 2013, you're using it heavily, and you're looking forward to the enhancements in 2016, then certainly you should be sure to leverage that and to identify that. But the first question that you need to ask, and as you look at that slide, it identifies it, you need to understand and look at what you are currently using SharePoint for in your organizations. And if you don't have SharePoint right now, you're doing something else with a file share, with the portal, with some document sharing, then identify what those workloads are. Identify what it is that you do and what is important and impactful to your organization. If you're looking at these 8 bullets and you're trying to figure out which ones are best used within your organization or what you are focused on as an organization, then have that conversation internally. Call a meeting, book some of the people in your organization, and have the conversation. There's nothing wrong with starting the conversation early and often to understand what things you're going to be targeting within your IT strategy and your roadmap going forward, and ensuring that you do hit the milestones you need and utilize the products that are available to you. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at your IT strategy and you're looking at your business, your demands, your expectations, make sure that SharePoint isn't your strategy itself. Your strategy should be something that's going 5 years out, 10 years out. It incorporates the support and the staffing and resource needs that will best support the organization. But SharePoint shouldn't be the strategy itself. And that was one of the key messages that we drove home at Ignite. As I jump to the next slide here, next and final in the strategy conversation, you'll see that we're talking more about through alignment, value is realized. And the value message, the alignment message, is one that I'm a very big proponent of. And we want to identify, looks like my slide isn't moving here, but hopefully it will jump forward shortly. I'm going to blame the internet for that. You see one of my favorite phrases, there's no I in team, but there is in Raise. So identify, looking at the value statements, identify that employee productivity is something that is critical to your organization. Identify and assess the fact that the balance of resources should be given to the system as well as to adoption. Far too many times I've consulted and seen organizations who are very much focused on their rollout, but then they falter and they fall flat when it comes to adoption. So my general rule of thumb is that 15% of your project team should be focused on adoption itself. And many times, unfortunately, we look at companies and I ask the same question, and a project team of 20 people, everyone looks around the room when I ask who is most concerned with adoption and who's responsible for adoption, and that's just not good, because the only way to use SharePoint and to get it implemented successfully is to do so with the people and the tools and the staff that you have on hand. And people love to be supported, and they love to feel that the impact that they're making is one that's benefiting the organization across the company, and it's very critical that you do have people in place specifically around adoption. And then, of course, just using the right lens. So by using the right lens, I mean understand what the functionality is within SharePoint, understand what you should be using when, and ensure that you have aligned yourself with your strategic goals as you move forward as an organization. With that, we're going to roll to our closing slide, and we can look through some of the questions that have been asked. Again, if you do have questions, please post them up through the message dialogue, and we will go through them now. What I'm going to do is I'll read out the question, and then Maarten or Randy, as I'm fumbling through screen share, if you guys want to take point on answering, that would be wonderful.
I like the one. Yep, it's football. That's the best question, the best remark actually. So yeah, sorry guys, but it is football, not soccer.
That's right, and of course, being in North America, we have a different understanding of that, but we'll let that go. So it's never good to have a sports conversation on any of these webcasts, because certainly I'd be talking about hockey and then I'd lose half of the audience, so we don't want to do that. So the first question here is, when you say on-premise or on-premises, do you mean file shares?
I think that question came up when I was talking about hybrid search, the hybrid search service application. And with on-premises files, what we mean is that every file because your SharePoint 2013 or your SharePoint 2016 farm is doing the crawling, so every file that your SharePoint on-premises farm can crawl, you can bring those files, that crawled content to your SharePoint Online search index. So yes, that includes file shares as well. Absolutely.
And also to take that answer. Sorry, go ahead, Ray.
Just interject real quickly. Sorry, Eric. So I think that's a great story. And, one thing, probably 2 points I'll make just very quickly is I would always be a little bit wary about how you're crawling file shares, and maybe being, very clear on what the UNC paths you want to pick and choose. And I say that because, with file shares, typically you have this concept of security through obscurity, right? So people can't typically get down to see a certain file because they can't navigate through a parent folder. But recognize that when SharePoint's going to be crawling this, it in fact can see everything. And while you have security trimming architecture in place where the NTFS permissions will be applied, note that a user actually oftentimes has access to a certain file if they knew what the path was. So just be very wary when you start exposing your file shares through enterprise search. What you might find is you're shining a spotlight on content that you may not be ready to surface. So always behooves you to be careful what paths you're choosing, and it might make some sense to do a little bit of discovery and validation that your permission set is correct. The last thing I wanted to mention, and just to confirm, Maarten, when you talked about this search unification a moment ago, are we actually going to see this, instead of having two search results, right? Maybe I would have Office 365 on the left and my on-premises on the right. These are actually going to be unified, so there's a single federated or feathered result set. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. Yes, no longer different result sources, just one result source with your entire index in there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's cool. All right, that was all.
Excellent. So to take that one step further, I guess we could just identify that there are basically all sorts of different flavors of SharePoint right now. You have Office 365, which is entirely in the cloud. You have a full on-prem suite, which would mean that you've got everything fully enclosed within the four walls of your organization, and nothing is extended further into the cloud. And then a hybrid model, which would blend the two together. So I'm not sure exactly the intent or purpose of that question, but I thought just to identify those as your three options, if you will, the three flavors of SharePoint, and then file shares, of course, within each three. We have a new one which is just coming in, which I see was down below as well, so I guess we can mark that one as answered, and I'll read this one out. We have an organization online today who's struggling with understanding all the products and are trying to determine when to use an Office 365 group over a SharePoint team site. Maarten, do you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. Well, a SharePoint team site is it has a document library. So the team site is really about collaborating and working together around documents. And like I said, when I was discussing Office 365 groups, the calendar sharing experience, for example, from a SharePoint team site is not very intuitive. It's not working very well. So if the collaboration is more than just around documents, then I would say go for an Office 365 group, because the Office 365 group includes, it creates, for example, a distribution list as well. So when you send an email to your group, everybody in that distribution group, in that Office 365 group, will receive that email. It will have a good calendaring experience as well.
And that group, just to double check, Maarten, so that Office 365 group actually does get a first-class mailbox as well, right? So there's even a mail storage container.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's super cool, and I kind of liken this to the next generation of the mailbox app that we had in SharePoint 2013. I think it's way too early to say, but with Office 365 groups, and the more I see people starting to use that, I'm not going to predict the depth of the team site, but we might start hearing the first few bells being chimed about that. Perhaps time will tell.
Yeah. One more thing I'd like to add to this is, for example, in the Office 365 groups, the members of the groups can invite additional members, or if a group is public, people can join that group themselves. So you can create public groups or private groups. So that's also a bit different than from a team site, where you probably need someone with the site admin powers to actually add people to the members group or the contributors group, for example.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, when I hear about that, it screams a much better level of productivity. So I'm really happy to hear all that stuff coming on.
Excellent. Thanks, guys, for that. Next question, does Office 365 groups have more than one document library?
No, it does not. And in fact, the document library that's behind the Office 365 group, it is, technically it is a document library, but you cannot access it like a document library. So you cannot access the document library settings to create views or add metadata or etc. So it's basically just a storage container to store your documents and your files corresponding with your Office 365 group. And the files that you put in there, that's what you work on inside your Office 365 group. And basically they've done that on purpose, because they want to make it as easy as possible for people to start using it and leveraging it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Maarten. I see a question here from Andre. He says, the slide he sees says thank you, and that is correct. We are in the Q&A portion of the conversation today, of the webinar today, so you are on the last slide, which is the thank you slide, so that is a good thing. Next question, with regards to Yammer and Microsoft disabling the storage of documents, what will happen to documents currently stored within Yammer?
I think the person who asked this question might misunderstood me, or maybe I said it wrongly. Microsoft is not going to disable the storage of documents inside of Yammer. They're just disencouraging it. So what they would like you to do is store a document in SharePoint and then post a link to that document in Yammer, and then start maybe your conversation in Yammer or in the conversation pane next to your Office web app. But it's just disencouraging you to store documents inside Yammer. They're not going to, as far as I know, they're not going to disable it. Because
Sorry, Maarten. No, you finish first. I thought you were done.
One more thing I'd like to add from an admin perspective. If you are an enterprise, if you're an admin of a Yammer enterprise network, you can disable attachments. And by doing so, you effectively disable the storage of documents in Yammer as well. But there's a big caveat, because if you do that, you can no longer attach images to your conversations as well. So there's a good reason not to do that.
Okay, I don't have anything to say, because you said exactly what I was going to say. Well done. Read my mind.
Yeah, I support that as well, guys. Well done. Next question is on metadata. So will there be an ability to add metadata in Office 365 groups? Yes or no?
I wouldn't know about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Today that is definitely a challenge, and I've already heard some people talk about the challenges with that, and this kind of goes a little bit back to are we going to be able to create additional document libraries into the Office 365 group, and then if so, would they be the same types of templates or apps as we now call them in SharePoint 2013? I think it's a little bit too early to say on that, but the way I see this is going, and I kind of joked a little bit earlier about maybe the death of the team site. There are some reasons where the team site is still a better solution. But remember that Office 365 groups are brand new. I mean, these are still effectively version 1. I would expect these kinds of things to come back as really good feedback, and Microsoft will be rethinking, what the next generation of Office 365 groups needs to support.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a version 1, so that it's being developed as we speak. And also, please use user voice. If you have additional requests, make sure that you visit the user voice site for Office 365 and raise that request.
Yes, totally agree. That information, that content is used and reviewed by Microsoft. So do use those tools and facilities that are available to you, because they do get reviewed, and your content will be taken to heart. Next question. Great overview, guys. Thank you. Never hurts to read these. Great webinar, really useful. Can you offer more information on how OneDrive for Business might work in a hybrid model? We are currently Office 365 with Hosted Exchange and SharePoint on-prem for performance reasons primarily. How does OneDrive for Business differ from SharePoint 2013? So, Maarten, I believe you covered that already, but by all means, please go ahead and address that.
Yeah, what we've seen at Ignite, Office, the OneDrive for Business, they're really going to change something in two aspects of OneDrive for Business. First of all, they're going to do something about the sync client. So they've announced at Ignite that later on this year, at the end of this year, they're going to release a new sync client to make sure that all the problems that we all have with OneDrive for Business, that all these syncing issues, they're going to go away. And the next thing, if you want to create a hybrid scenario with OneDrive for Business right now in SharePoint 2013, you're going to need, first of all, some PowerShell commands, and you're going to need some configuration to make sure that you can, for example, use the OneDrive for Business in Office 365, but still use regular team sites in your SharePoint on-prem farm. But that doesn't work quite well out of the box. You're going to need to do some redirecting in IIS and DNS redirects maybe as well, to make sure that when people click that link, that you will go to your OneDrive for Business in Office 365. And that's the portion that they have put efforts in for 2016. So in SharePoint 2016, the whole hybrid scenario is going to be much, much better. And there's going to be a wizard-like configuration screen where you can say, okay, I'd like to use my on-prem for team sites, but I want to use OneDrive for Business in Office 365. Please configure that for me, and the configuration wizard will take care of that. So that will be much better.
Great, thanks, Maarten. Just a quick note here for people that are sending in questions. One thing that we can't see through this interface is who is asking the question. So if you are following up on a previous question, just identify which one you asked, because all we're able to do is mark them answered and unanswered. So thank you for that. Looks like we have everything covered. There's another question on metadata. Metadata helps my users find things. I'm not sure we'll be able to answer this, but we'll give it a shot. I hate to move away from the use of metadata. Do we know if Microsoft is going to reconsider their decision with regard to metadata in O365 groups? I personally have heard nothing public about that. Gentlemen?
No, me neither.
Yeah, I wish I could give you a better answer. It's not a public one yet.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. We have a few minutes left for questions. If you do have one, then by all means, please ask it. I wanted to also mention before we wrap up something that is not directly connected to the SharePoint conversation, but I wanted to let you know that as a follow-up to the conversation today, those that have registered for the webinar will receive an invitation to create a profile for themselves and organizations on Empty Cubicle. That's courtesy of Empty Cubicle, and we look forward to seeing you at emptycubicle.com. Randy?
Cool. And we hope to see many of you at the European SharePoint Conference. I'm looking forward to heading back out there. I think this will be my third event. Although I have to say, being from San Diego now, being in Stockholm in November is probably not the best location weather-wise, at least for my blood. But look forward to seeing you guys there. And Eric, we've had some fun in the past, Barcelona in particular.
Exactly. Coming from Toronto, I'll be leaving Toronto in November to visit Stockholm for the event, and I'm certainly looking forward to getting out there because any excuse to leave Toronto in November is a great one. Okay, we have a few more minutes left here. If there are any other questions, please go ahead and ask. And as I say that, we have 2 more questions. That's amazing. I think these are both from Randy, but I'm not sure. How should a business present all these available products to users? How do we describe it as far as when to use what?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'll give you an answer. And Eric, I suspect from your strategy perspective, you have a thought as well. And I'm really going to go back to what I started talking about, and what Eric you added to that. It's really focusing on what the needs are. So if you're really going through a proper analysis and you're looking at what the challenges are today, and you're not really thinking so much about SharePoint or Office 365 or any of that productivity stack, if you really hone in on what needs to be done to make a difference in our organization, that should then point to the best tool that's going to be of use. Now, and I don't want to say that with the assumption that SharePoint is even the right tool. There's a lot of workloads that come up where SharePoint is not the best way to go forward. So I would say the short answer is get your requirements very clearly established, know what the business needs are. That always has to come first. Then you're probably going to do some type of trade-off consideration. If I end up going with Sway for a particular type of publishing need versus say maybe a third-party tool or just using another out-of-the-box tool, there's going to be pros and cons that each of those delivers. For certain ones where it's really hard to weigh the advantages and disadvantages, you might consider a kind of a lightweight proof of concept. Take a small team, take a small project, take something low risk. Do a little bit of evaluation. Try it one way, try it the other way, see what works for you. I would definitely say in my experience that what works for one organization does not necessarily work for others, and everyone wants to talk about best practices and what really is the best practice. The truth is they're situational, right? Organizations are different, and really the best way to know is to do a proper evaluation on behalf of your organization, how your users think. Eric, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more. Getting your requirements together and understanding what it is that your organization is looking for from a product perspective, from a performance perspective, are really the fundamental first steps in any type of decision or any type of deployment. Unfortunately, I've seen far too many organizations fail in their initial rollout and deployment of SharePoint simply because of missed requirements or functionality gaps that were not earlier identified. Far too often you have an individual from an organization who may go to a conference and come back and believe that they are the expert. And while that may be the case, that's something that the organization has to embrace. So strategically thinking about it as rungs on a ladder, you have to hit every rung on the ladder in order to climb the ladder. And that doesn't mean that you can't get there. It just means that you have to take the appropriate steps fundamentally, strategically, in order to do so. You wouldn't just leap up from the bottom of the ladder and expect to grab onto the top successfully.
Yeah, good point. I think a good example of that, going back to there's been this metadata question. I'll get a lot of organizations will come to me and say, I'm really looking to replace my records management system. Maybe they're using HP Trim or they're using Documentum or some, very expensive system they're looking to move off of. And they say, I want to go to SharePoint for records management. That's what I need to do. And they might already have SharePoint today, but they're using it for very, lightweight workloads. They're using it for basic document management, maybe just file sharing effectively. But they're not really using metadata. They don't have an information management strategy. They don't have a governance strategy. And trying to jump to a complex workload like records management without having some of those kind of initial steps or rungs, to use Eric's analogy, I think can be a pretty dangerous mistake.
Yeah, no question. While we're just wrapping up the last few questions here, I wonder if we can just go up to the second slide, the introductory slide, so people have access to our coordinates for Twitter and whatnot. Next question. This is very interesting. It's not a question; it's more of a comment, and it's certainly something that I think I haven't seen, but we should definitely someone should start working on. Couldn't Microsoft provide some kind of decision tree for all these social products? Great point, great question, Jens. Have you seen anything on that?
What I've seen at Ignite, and I think the session is on channel 9. There is a session. It's actually called "When to Use What," and it's not. They try to build a decision tree there, but basically what they tell people is what you two guys just been saying as well. Get your requirements and check out what you try, maybe some stuff out, and see what works for you as an organization, because it is different for every organization.
Yeah, great call, Martin. The When to Use What session was delivered in Chicago by Canwall Kippel and Richard Harbridge from Two to Lead. There's also a 65-page white paper that goes along with that. So for all those who are able to do so, hop online and search for it. You can also reach out to Randy, Martin, or myself, and we'll be happy to direct you to that content.
Yeah, and just to add to that, guys, because I saw that session as well. I didn't get to see my friends live, but I did skim the white paper. They have a lot in that particular deck, and in that session it addresses team sites versus the Office 365 group storage. If you're looking for some of the pros and cons there, that would be helpful. I think we're getting a little bit of airport noise. Guessing that's from you, Eric.
Yes, my apologies. It was very important to notice that if there are any issues in the airport, we should all consult the authorities there. My fault for not being on mute.
I'm just teasing you. All right. Anything else? We're probably about time to wrap up here.
I think that's everything on the Q&A. If anyone else has another question, please pop it up. Can the admin turn off external group members' invites in Office 365 groups?
Right now, I don't think it is possible to invite external group members, actually. It might be something that's coming, but right now it's not possible. It's just for internal group members, for internal organizational employees.
Right. For example, can I extend this to my vendor, to my customers, so that we get this kind of extranet collaboration? Yeah, I don't think that's possible yet, but it's a reasonable request. I have heard some discussions about that being brought in at some point, and I would agree. If that functionality is brought in, it's a very reasonable governance policy to want to be able to turn that off. Right. There could be huge risks if you're talking about certain intellectual property or PII or anything that'd be of a sensitive nature, being very sure that doesn't get shared externally. Anything else on that, guys?
Yeah, I was just waiting for an announcement to pass here. Looks like I'm not going to be able to do it, so I'll just talk over it. There's a question here from Tony about the When to Use What. I don't have a specific link for you, but I know that it's readily available online. So
it is on channel 9.
There you go.
Yeah, so in channel9.com.
If you aren't able to find...
It's probably worth mentioning that all the videos, all the content from Ignite is available on channel 9. So just go out to your favorite browser, do a search for channel 9, you'll find it, or just do channel 9 Ignite. Every single session out there you'll find. So if you didn't get a chance to make it, you got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of that content will be delivered as well in Stockholm for the European SharePoint Conference in November. So we look forward to seeing everybody out there. And again, if you have any questions about the content that's been delivered today, by all means, you have our Twitter handles up on the screen right now. Please feel free to reach out with your questions, and we'll be happy to get back and respond to those as best and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and just to add another point here, we are going to be making the slides, and there will be a full recording of this event on the BrightTalk interface. I'm told it'll be available shortly after our webinar concludes. So for your colleagues or those that maybe didn't quite get a chance to hear part of it, you can catch the full recording in its entirety at any point in the future.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks very much, everybody, for attending.
Yeah,
Once again, thank you very much to everyone for coming on today and joining us. We do see the view count here in the dialogue, and it's great to see so many people joining us today. On behalf of myself, Maarten, Randy, AvePoint, European SharePoint, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in Stockholm in November.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.